it's just me. All right, it's 12 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started.
All right. Hi, this is Joanne Ecton from Women Get It. And if you don't know who we are, we're a mentoring organization in Nashville, Tennessee. Our mission is to nurture careers for women in tech. And we do that with mentoring, with open dialogue, and really just sharing wisdom from one generation to another. So we're here today on our second Facebook Live event with two amazing women who are going to share their stories with you. We're talking today about moving into a tech career in a non-traditional way. So not having gone through the traditional 4 years of university, getting a computer science degree, and stepping into the field that way. So both of these ladies have done this very successfully, and they're going to share your stories with them. So first, let me introduce Rebecca Cronin-Dixon.
Hi.
And Kelly Stevens.
Hi.
And if you guys would just take a minute and talk about what you're doing today, introduce yourselves, and I know you go by a nickname, so if you want to go ahead and do that and introduce yourselves real quick.
Sure. So I go by Beck, short for Rebecca, and it's what most people are called in Australia, actually. And I work at Eventbrite as a data engineer now. I started off as a technical software engineer, and I mainly work in Python. Used to work in JavaScript. Yeah.
Okay.
Kelly Stevens. I work at Ingram Content Group, and I'm a software engineer there. I'm on the business intelligence team, so we handle a lot of the business's data and aggregate it together to create dashboards. Right now, I'm working in Ruby and Rails and JavaScript and Angular on the front end.
So I think, Kelly, we'll start with you. If you would talk about what you were doing before you shifted into tech and how you made that change and your motivation for doing that.
I graduated with a degree in marketing, and from there I moved into some marketing, some operational type positions. I basically just started to feel kind of unchallenged. I feel like we all have certain gifts, and I felt like I wasn't really using mine. I was working at a company that did IT recruiting, and that opened up the world for me of all the options and positions and things that I didn't even know about existed. So my brother-in-law introduced me to the software school. I looked into it, did some research, was not able to do the jump immediately because it was quit your job, go full-time situation. But a few months later I was. And so I decided, after kind of looking into it and talking with different people about what that would look like, made the jump. Have not looked back since, and I think it was the best decision in my life.
So the software school you're referring to is Nashville Software School,
Nashville Software
which is local here in Nashville, and it's a 6-month course, is it?
There's different options now. The one I went through was a 6-month course. We did 3 months of front end and JavaScript, and my cohort did 3 months with Ruby on Rails in the back end.
Okay. Now, Bex, did you also go through Nashville Software School?
I did. I did the 6-month course as well, but
Okay.
my back end was C#,
Got it.
which I haven't done since.
But I think that's pretty typical, and we'll get to
Yeah.
that later. But so what were you doing before you went to NSS?
So before, so I got a degree in business and commerce, and I mainly did that because I wanted to do a degree by correspondence because I was living in Beijing at the time, but I didn't want to give up university. So that one, I saw that, I was like, all right, that seems interesting, and I can do it abroad, by correspondence. So I did that, and I became an event manager while in Beijing, and I enjoyed it. It was good, but I reached a certain point where I just wasn't learning enough anymore. I sort of had got it down pat. I knew what, I ran through my motions with each event. That was it. And so I moved here 4 years ago because my husband got a job in Nashville, and he's American. And when I got here, I wasn't able to work. So I was able to sort of learn what I wanted. And so I remember one night I sort of was like, okay, well, how about I make a website or even try? Because it seemed like this magic thing, like, of course I can't do it. I'm not smart enough. I got in there, and that night I got an image up on the web, and that was the biggest moment of my life at that point. Like, it was amazing. And then it was actually through another women's meetup here, a Girl Geek dinner, that I found out about the National Software School. because they were putting on like a project management night, and I thought, all right, well, I'll never be able to be an engineer, a software engineer, but maybe I could be on the project management side. I went there and met some people that told me about National Software School, and from then on, I was like, right, that's what I'm going to do.
Okay. So you both you've graduated a few years ago. I think it's just been a couple, 3 years for both of you, right? Tell me what it was like to make that shift out of your previous life into the world of tech and engineering. What do you think prepared you for that? What were some transferable skills, and what were the real friction moments for you?
I'll start. For me, there was just that initial fear, right, that you go through when I knew my world before, but this was just totally unfamiliar. And so there's, they call imposter syndrome. You just feel like I'm faking it, and people are going to find out that I don't know what the heck I'm doing. So there was that initial fear that you have to kind of get over and just dive in. Coming though from a really office setting, I'd worked on that end of it. So at Ingram, that was, I think, something that was a big plus for them when they were looking to hire, is they needed somebody that also understood the business side, the business needs, and could communicate clearly between the two groups and that sort of thing. So I think those soft skills that I picked up in my career before really helped to transfer, because now I was able to understand they want this feature, this item, and here's why it's important, and that it makes money in this way, which is the end goal of the company, is the money factor. So for me, that was helpful to transfer over, but it's also very scary because you're taking that and you're jumping in. So
it's a big leap, but you're right. We're seeing more and more in the industry the need for soft skills, for business domain knowledge, right, and defining what done looks like, right? What does success look like? So I can see how that would be a real transferable skill. What about your story? Did you find, when you were interviewing for that first junior dev position, what did you feel like gave you the entry point that you needed?
Yeah, I think for me, definitely my soft skills as well. So my networking skills, being able to empathize with different parties. As you said, like the product side, what they need, but what our limitations are for engineering. I found that that skill was pretty transferable with what I had done. I think like soft skills, that's the main thing to take away, is like coming into engineering, especially when you haven't done a CS degree, like, well, what can I offer? What could I possibly offer you? And it's those soft skills that come from your other jobs. And I think that's very important to sort of, when you're going for engineering jobs, is to state that these are the things, these are the soft skills that I've learned, and this is how it'll help your company.
Right. So what did you think was there something that put you at a disadvantage from the more traditional employees who had gone through that engineering school and not through something like Nashville Software School? Did you find that you were at a disadvantage, or did you find that perhaps maybe you had some advantages because of your previous work experience?
I think it's a bit of both. It's how you look at it. I remember when I started Eventbrite, my manager told me, because I relayed these fears to him and said, but what could I offer that someone with a computer science degree has? And he said, well, coming from a boot camp, or even like learning on your own, you're actually you can actually apply your skills quicker. So a lot of people with computer science skills or computer science degrees, they don't actually jump into the code a lot. They're very learned the theoretical knowledge of it. And so one of the things that I had was I could jump in and I could sort of start learning that way quicker. And it's sort of like one of the disadvantages I had was I didn't know that theoretical knowledge coming in. So it's something that I very much had to pick up. And even after 2.5 years at the job, now I still have to take that onus on myself to be reading, and learning outside of work, just to catch up on that. But I enjoyed that. I really loved the learning aspect. I like never getting to that stage where you know everything about your career.
There's no possible way to know everything about technology at the rate of change.
And people that I've been working with for 20 years, I can teach them things as well, because you specialize in something, or you've researched something. So I mean, that's the right approach to take as well.
it's kind of the difference for me in like book smart and street smart, where we didn't have the background and that underlying knowledge that can be very helpful, but at the same time, 6 months of hands-on actively doing it. So
practical application.
Exactly. So I've had people that might know more, like you said, theoretically, but when it comes to develop that feature in the app, they don't really understand how to get it done.
They also there's this, is it called the cowboy and the astronaut, where the cowboy coder jumps in and breaks things like builds something, breaks things, builds something, breaks things. With the astronaut, they'll sit for think about the requirements, construct this plan around building an application, but it takes a lot longer time. So it's like meeting somewhere in the middle. I feel like those are the the cowboy coder is often the person from boot camp or from learning on their own, versus the person that's done a computer science degree is the astronaut. And eventually you get somewhere in the middle. But that's the sweet spot. But that's what you offer too. Is coming from these two different places. And in a company, it's good to have a balance of both.
Well, you have to, right? You have to. Now, one thing that I had heard, and again, this is hearsay in some of the conversations I've had, so confirm or deny, that coming out of a school like NSS, you're already familiar with working as a team and dealing with things like shared code repositories and doing demos and the basic methodology of working together to build a product together, whereas a computer science engineer in a university may not have that. So is there any truth to that statement?
I cannot speak for the CS side of that, but
Absolutely.
from my experience at NSS, absolutely. We learned how to use Git very early on,
Right.
so that we could work as a team because that was part of the requirements. So we had some products on our own, but especially in the first half of it, nearly all of them were team-based, where you had to understand how to work together, pick different pieces, figure out where your strengths and weaknesses were. And then, honestly, sometimes Git can just be the disaster, the downfall of people if they're not understanding and they're going in about it the wrong way. So,
but all of that is reality and preparing you for the business.
Absolutely.
World, right?
And it's better, for me, it was better to fail in the software school than
Absolutely.
to get into real world.
Absolutely.
I think it prepared me pretty well for that because we had kind of a bit of an offhand teaching as well, where they'd be like, all right, here's your requirements, or here's now you guys figure it out. And our teachers were there to help us with any coding questions, but it was up to us to deal with those conflicts of what one person wanted versus the other thought, and then dealing with when somebody had pushed up their code and you had as well, and there was a conflict of which version you were going to use. So all those sort of things I think really prepared me for my job. And also coming up with those requirements as well. So you get this basic requirements from your product managers or just from your higher ups, and now you've got to just figure out, all right, is that possible on the engineering side? What does that actually mean? Do you ask what questions do you need to then come to them? I feel like NSS prepared me pretty well for that.
That's great.
Because you're not really spoon fed, so you have your requirements, and then you have to figure out how does this break down into manageable pieces of work. What questions do I need to get further details on, and that sort of thing, which is very real life.
Something that now I'm like, oh, of course, but at the time when you're just doing your own, especially because I'd done a few things on my own before I joined NSS, a few applications, and working alone is very different than working with a team or having somebody that you've got to answer to. Something I didn't think about until I was in that situation. I'm glad I was in that situation in NSS.
In a little bit more protected environment.
Yeah.
So what would you do differently? So now you've been in the business world. You've I think at least a couple of years for both of you, right? And promoted and gotten more responsibility. So you've advanced since you've graduated and started. So now that you can look back at it, what would you have done differently if you were starting all over again?
I wouldn't have put so much pressure on myself to because there is so much breadth in this field. It's hard to focus on a few things, and then you see, especially when you're in a boot camp or something similar, you see all your classmates being like, oh, I did a tutorial on Node last night, I did a tutorial on this or that, and you're like, well, I haven't done that, I've got to go do it.
Right. I'm slacking off.
yeah, and you eventually there's this thing, burnout is a real thing where you can do too much. So now I have a really good, I think work-life balance, where I still read outside of, I can still do some, a lot of learning outside of work, but I won't do it if I've been stressed that day. I take time to do my hikes and things like that. Whereas when I first started, I was like, nah, I've got to spend every waking minute sort of coding or doing something like that. And you end up I found that I wasn't learning as much because I was just, my brain was fried, and I wasn't always there, mentally for work too, because I was just tired from the last day. So I would do that. I would probably take that pressure off, and as long as I'd learned something more than I had the day before, then that's fine.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's important to prioritize because there's a million things you can learn or do, but really set those out and then hit them one at a time. And for me, also, I would get stuck, and especially in school in the first 3 months, and I would stay up till 2 in the morning, and then I'm pulling my hair out frustrated. And I've learned since to step away.
Yeah.
So even at work, if I get really stuck, maybe just get up and take a walk around, and then come back. And to me, it's like a puzzle. I have to do the same thing when I get stuck in that spot. So that was a learning lesson for me, is to just, if you're that stuck, just pause. And it's okay to take a break, take 5 minutes, and then get fresh eyes to come back.
There's been so many times when I've the night before been like, there's just no possible way to do this. And then you come back there saying like, there it is.
So
Yeah. Let your brain work on it in the background when you're not so stressed over it. And something else you mentioned earlier is what you studied in school isn't what you're coding now, right? And I'm sure you've seen lots of changes in languages. So we get asked this a lot from the women in our mentoring group: is what language should I study? So what advice would you give to women who ask that question?
For me, I think it's just important to just start almost, because like we said, there's so many things that you can do. So I was just thrown into JavaScript and Rails. I didn't choose it. That's just what the cohort had. And I now am working in it and I love it, but it's not necessarily what everyone is using. And so if there's a specific company you're aiming to work at, then maybe find what they're using and go at that. But I think really you just need to figure out how to learn and how to start solving the problems. Because once you understand the basic fundamentals of how it works, then you can learn the nuances of switching between JavaScript and Rails and Python or whatnot.
Because a lot of times, they have the same the fundamentals are across the board. So I would very much say pick up a lot of sort of more design pattern books that are agnostic to a language. They'll often have examples in a certain language, but it's more important to get the idea of what the design pattern is trying to say. And when you learn a language, try and grasp that idea, whether it's object-oriented programming or or algorithms, because they're pretty, that they transfer to different languages. So I very much agree that think about the fundamentals of languages rather than focusing on which language is the best to learn, because you will switch all the way through your career. I started off with C#. I'm doing Python, but I'm also doing a number of other different tools that I use. So, languages I have to learn, like Java, JavaScript. I sort of jump around a lot. And I'm not the best in a lot of them. I know Python the most, but I could. Now I have the confidence that if someone says, "Can you program in this?" I can, because I know I've spent time learning the fundamentals of programming.
Right. No, that's fair. I've said that many times, that coding is a competency, and then each language is just syntax, right? Learn the syntax.
Yeah. It's like spoken language, right? You have your verbs and your nouns and your adjectives, and then you got to figure out, if you're speaking in Spanish versus English, what that looks like.
Or Australian versus
Yeah.
American English.
It's been very hard.
Now, what about from our Facebook Live or Instagram? Are we seeing any questions coming in?
One question that we have is interviewing for your first couple of positions coming out of boot camp. If there was a question that you didn't know the answer to, if they were trying to see your technical competency, you didn't know the answer to it, how do you address that?
I think it's best to be honest, because they probably do know the answer. So if you're trying to muddle around it, they're going to call you on it. So that's, to me, worse than just saying, to be honest, I don't know. But I found that it helps to also say, I would love to take that home and Google it. Can I email you the answer? So I think don't be scared to say you don't know. And then I think a step above that is follow up with, but I'd love to find out, can I take that home and let you know? And I think they appreciate that, because then it shows you're never going to know all the answers, but that you can figure it out.
Because a lot of the point is when you're interviewing someone, it's not that you want them to find the correct answer. You want to see how they think. You want to see how they work. And so often, what I would do is I'd pseudocode it out. I'd be like, okay, well, maybe I can get that first little bit. We'd have to get here and then here and then here. I don't know exactly how to do it, but would you mind pair programming? How would you solve it? I love when people ask me that one. So that means I can pair program with them and see if they, if I can give them a little bit of information, will they run with it? Those sort of things. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing to remember is somebody, I've actually passed some people that have completely answered the question, but I don't know how they think. Whereas I've continued people online if they haven't finished answering the question, they don't know it, but I've seen that they can think and they can run with things and they have a good concept of or how they deal with stress too when they don't know the answer. They just freeze up and be like, I can't do it, or do they piece through it with you?
Right.
So
I have one question from the Instagram. If you're homeschooling, so I assume if you're teaching yourself at your own pace, when do you know that you're ready to go start applying for a job?
I'd say that one's a difficult one because it depends on the job as well. But I would say there's a number of job interview questions online. So I would do a lot of them. I'd make sure you do a lot of the sorting algorithms. Make sure you can do all those. If you can answer a lot of those online, then I think you're pretty good. I would if you think you're ready, if you think you're in a good state, go and do some interviews. Just line them up, and they might be terrible, and then you know where you're at. But that's the only way you're gonna be able to know. So I think just jumping in.
I would say also set up coffees with people who are in the field. Because sometimes if you want to work at a company, you don't necessarily want to burn the bridge of that interview yet.
Yeah.
So maybe set up a coffee interview with somebody and have mock interviews, and they would be able to guide you more in that kind of situation so that you can see a better base level from somebody that knows what they're
getting involved in the meetups in your town and meeting people and meeting them for coffees and getting their idea. I think being involved with the community, you'll know when you're ready, and it's also a great way to get those introductions to jobs. To jobs.
Okay. All right, ladies, we're running out of time, but I really thank you both for being here and helping us and sharing your experiences. For folks that are on Facebook or Instagram, we do this bi-monthly, so we want to hear from you. What is it? What questions do you have? What topics should we address? Please just put the comments in online and let us know, and we will see you again in 2 months. Bye.
Bye.